Change is a neutral term. It's not positive. It's not negative. It just is. It is what it is. And when you look at change like that, when you approach it that way, you're really able to accept it and feel it in a way that is not going to drag you down.
Right. So now the question is, how do I kind of look at that without judgment? And then based on that change, okay, here's now how my behaviors shift. Here's how my process will shift. The other thing that I think is really critical with change, because a lot of times change can bring a level of negativity or grief, is focusing on the present, focusing on the present, being where your feet are, as we like to say.
Welcome to Limitless Minds, the podcast where curiosity meets greatness. Each week, co-host DJ Eidson and Harry Wilson sit down with some of the most exceptional individuals across sports, business, and beyond. From world-class athletes and peak performance coaches to visionary CEOs, entrepreneurs, and influential authors, they dive deep into the stories and strategies that drive extraordinary success. If you're ready to discover what it takes to be truly limitless and push beyond your own limits, you're in the right place.
All right, we're back with part 2 of this podcast episode with DJ and I. Sans guest, no guest. We've been talking about change, we're talking about transitions. It really kind of got us inspired when DJ took his oldest daughter on a college tour this past weekend. And I just kind of was really curious, like, how he's going to deal with this, right? Because, Shea is kind of a cornerstone of the house and the oldest child, and this will be the first time they've gone through it. And so we got us really talking about change in general and how we're both kind of thinking about that relative to our kids and as they move on and so on and so forth. But in this part 2, I really wanted to kind of open up the landscape a little bit to like mindset practices that, that people can leverage to prepare for major transitions for change. We think we all struggle with change. Most people don't love change. Some people can handle it better than others. Some people have more of a tolerance for it. So, given all the people, the greats that we've been around, the mindset coaches we've been around, excellent coaches and, leaders in business and sports, like I think we've probably been able to pick up some things in our tool bag that we can share with others. So I wanted to pick it up there, DJ. We started talking a little bit about different things folks can do. For me with Gracie, was like, I want to spend as much time as I can, so that way when she goes off to college, like I can feel like I've really deposited a lot of that, so then I can withdraw those memories. But as far as like kind of the everyday person, like what are some things that we can do to prepare for these major transitions or changes, whether they be macro or micro?
I mean, we get the opportunity, on a daily basis to engage and interact with some of the best mindset coaches in the world. And one of the things I picked up, and you'll see me any seminar that I'm at, keynote, workshop, whatever it is, I'm in the back with a notepad taking notes, no matter how many times I've heard it, because I learn something new every time. And a lot of times it's just based on the context of where I am in my, at any moment, given moment in my life. And one of the things that I recall around change, and I think it was Josh Lifrak that taught me this, is that, change is a neutral term. It's not positive. It's not negative. It just is. It is what it is. And when you look at change like that, and if I've asked this to different groups, I'll say, when you hear change, write down some words that you automatically, think about. And when you start to question the audience of those words, the words are usually leaning towards negative, and when you look at it again, that's what Josh taught me. It truly is a neutral term. And when you approach it that way, you're really able to accept it and feel it in a way that is not going to drag you down. And then you can do what you need to do, those right actions and behaviors to get you to your goals and to where you want to go to. So that for me, fundamentally, Harry, is like very, very important to look at change as a neutral term, and has helped me significantly.
Yeah. And for those that may be listening to this for the first time or need to be reminded on what neutral means, right? It's this area between positive and negative, right? Where most people are very familiar with positive and negative. That's, all the self-help books are talking about positivity. Certainly you understand the negativity is bad for you, but people don't realize how powerful negativity can be, especially when verbalized, right? 80% of our thoughts are negative. And when verbalized, they're 4 to 7 times more powerful, again, as far as working against us. Sure. And so, neutral thinking is a concept where you can acknowledge the negative or that negative scenario or circumstance, but the thing is that you have to acknowledge it without judgment, without grading, right? And then develop and identify a set of solutions, or standard behaviors, a set of process driven, a direction way of going about things that allows you to just kind of focus on that,
Yep.
right? And worry about the results later. And so that's where DJ's talking about neutral a little bit, and how change is really just a neutral term. It's not really a judgment. It's just
Right.
is what it is. We used to do this way, or this is how it used to be, and now
That's
it's
right.
different. That's true. That might be true, right? So now the question is, how do I kind of look at that without judgment, and then based on that change, okay, here's now how my
That's
behaviors
right.
shift. Here's how my process will shift. And so I think that's really important. I think the other thing that I think is really critical with change, because a lot of times change can bring a level of negativity or grief, or um, sadness or
Right.
uncertainty, is focusing on, like, on the present,
Mm.
focusing on the present, being where your feet
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
we like to say, and gratitude, right?
Yeah. That's right.
So, finding joy in the change, I think, um, you know, because the absence of joy a lot of times is negativity, right? And so I think that finding joy in this change, what opportunities
Hmm.
exist, and again, it's not about being overly positive, right? It's like, okay, where is there any ounce of gratitude and joy when I'm present here in this
Yep.
change? What opportunities exist? Okay, great. Now what can I do? Right. I think those things are really critical in the face of change and transitions. Is, so for example, if it was, back to part one, if DJ's daughter goes off to Georgetown or wherever she ends up going, and there's a kind of moment of like kind of like grief and like sadness, like, dang, she's gone. But like, how great is it that, you're able to get this girl out to, American
Yeah.
University or Georgetown or whatever it ends up being. There's
Yeah.
joy in that, right? And there's
That's
gratitude in
right.
that. Graduation, all the things. And so just like leaning into those things, I think, is
No
really important.
question. Yeah. I think, joy is it's such an underutilized, concept, word, feeling. I was looking at the definition of joy means a feeling of great pleasure and happiness. It's like, to feel that sense of joy during a change, I think is really important. And also realizing this, what I wanted to mention earlier, is that although change is neutral, change can have negative implications. There's sometimes where something changes, and it does have a negative implications. I just think that, like you said, when you look at the actual change, right, and without judgment, without narrative, you take out some of the emotion of it. That's where you can truly see what's going on. It's like, if I go outside right now, and I could go outside and say the weather's terrible, but really, the weather's it's 30 degrees right now. Like, that's what it is outside. That might be terrible to some people. It might not be, right? Like, like to somebody that's in Antarctica, maybe 30 degrees and sunny like it is now is a gorgeous day. And so that's the thing. We just really have to look at the truth and take out the narrative. And I think that helps you find joy, Harry. I think that's where I think, like, that's why I love what you're saying about that. You can find the joy in things when you look at things in a neutral way, and that's a really, really powerful word.
I also think that the routines and daily
Mm,
habits are important to maintain. So, when something changes, if it's probably a small piece of a pie of your everyday
right,
life,
right.
right? It might be something at work which feels really massive, but there's maybe an area of fitness that's important to you. There's an area of, like, home life. There's, whatever it might be, that you're part of your daily kind of work. And so the things that you can control, because oftentimes the change, unless you're in a significant leadership
Hmm.
position, either way, usually change is kind of spurred by, a lack of, like by, not by choice, it's by
Right.
necessity, right? It's the change is coming because it has
Yep.
to come, right? And so it may be out of one's control, but then there's these other areas in your everyday life and everyday work that might be things that you are fully in
Yes.
control of, right? Some certain daily routines, certainly daily habits that you can kind of make sure that that you can protect those, and that way you don't feel like everything
Yeah.
is changing, because I think sometimes things snowball where, like, this is one big change, and then it seems
Everything.
like
Right.
everything has
Right.
changed.
Right.
When reality is like that one thing, it might be big, but like it's changed on
Hmm.
its own. It's changed. I mean, it's changed like by its like that one thing changed. Really, nothing else really
Yeah.
changed, right? And so, let's while that's changing and we're figuring out the new plan, these other six, seven, eight things really
Yeah.
haven't been affected. So, how can I keep those things locked and loaded and kind of
Yeah.
routine based? I think that's
Yeah. No,
important.
it is. And you mentioned gratitude earlier, and then you also mentioned, like, when something happens, like, kind of looking for the good in things. I was talking, having a friend talk yesterday with a friend, Colleen Carter, and we were talking about like the visits to Georgetown and some of the other schools in DC, and we were talking about the price of schools, which is astronomical. Here, we haven't even gotten into that, man. I gotta offline. We'll talk about that, bro. Like we got to work harder. Okay, that's we got to work much harder.
Yeah,
But
this,
but we're talking about that. We're talking about some of the things that we just discussed here, and she said something that really hit me. She just came off of brain cancer, so she got a scar
mm,
right down the back of her head, and it was this just happened. I think her surgery was about 2 months ago, so she's just now kind of getting out and about. And she said, these are pretty awesome problems to have. We're talking about college, we're talking about AAU and travel, and the expenses around that. We're talking about all these things that people would love to have these problems, and it really put it in perspective. Being what I know what she went through, A, and then B, how blessed we are. And so seeing that in the midst of a change, is really important. The other thing is when things change, and you and I've seen this in our careers. We've seen this in our daily walk, and is that there's typically a moment of where you feel really uncomfortable, but then there's all these doors that open up, and these opportunities, and these people that you meet as a result of the change that you would have never met if you would have just stayed comfortable. And so I think there's a lot to be thankful and feel blessed with when you do meet those new folks amongst in the midst of a change. So
yeah, yeah. Well, you mean, you think about other people and community. I mean, I think there's a big role in having a support system in these
true.
changes, right? I mean, I think it's really critical to like lean in on family, friends, mentors. That can be crucial. That can be crucial during times like these. I think that you know, sometimes just simply by like sharing where
Hmm.
you're at, like
Yeah.
where your head's at with somebody, like maybe hopefully ideally somebody external from the
Right.
change itself, if you can, that maybe have a less bias or, whatnot. I mean, we have that with our business, right? We've been doing this for a number of years, so it's really easy for us to kind of like try to make decisions like in a vacuum internally, which is great. But I think sometimes it's like getting some insight from somebody who isn't a part of the daily work that still has value to bring to the table because of their knowledge or their experience is nice, because sometimes it makes you feel like
Yeah.
you're not crazy. It makes you feel like, and maybe you might find that others are going through the exact same things. You're like, oh, okay, dope. Like this is not just
Yes.
me, right? Or whatever. Or they challenge you on something and then they can kind of check in on you and hold you accountable along the way. So I mean, I think that that's something that a lot of people don't do. I think that maybe it's because of pride and
Yeah.
ego, or maybe they
Yeah.
just don't think they have the
So
right resources around them. But like, it's like nobody. I respect anybody who's like who's
mm,
curious. You know what I mean? Somebody who's curious and willing to say, "Hey, I don't think I have the answers here. Here's what I'm seeing. I'm coming to you because I just trust you, and I think that like who doesn't want to give advice to somebody like that?
yeah.
Who doesn't want to like help support
Yeah. It's
somebody like that?
no question. No question. And you said
Yeah,
something to me around advisors and seeking advisors. I don't know, it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so I'm sitting in my bed before I go to sleep, and I got the book of Proverbs next to me, and I read, it was Proverbs 11:14. It said, "Where there's no guidance, a people fall, but in an abundance of counselors there's safety." And so it was really
yeah,
very interesting, and that gave me comfort because I'm like, you know what, like we have some pretty awesome people around us, and I think we all do, right? Like tap into that knowledge, seek counsel, seek advice, and it'll make your
well, I
yeah
mean, like,
make your job a little bit
yeah.
easier.
Think about your church and your and the Bible. I mean, like you're using that as a
That's
counselor, as
right.
an advisor. You know what I mean? You're using that as as that tool. Um, and you read it many times, different ways, different times in
Mm,
your life, and it almost kind of comes out with maybe the same directional advice, but maybe different ways to get there, depending on the season of life, right? So, I mean, I think that there's people that I reach out to regularly, um, that have been around during the kind of the story arc of our business, and I think that their advice has kind of evolved based on how we've evolved, which is
hmm.
interesting. There's kind of like this balance between because like some of these, as a founder and entrepreneur, especially as a CEO of a company, like you get all this, in many cases, you get this access to these different groups and resources, right? I mean, you know them well, DJ, but like whether it be like
Yeah.
Endeavor, for example, which has been a great resource for us. Um, particularly for me as the person that kind of entered into that, it's a great resource because there's all these mentors and like advisors and people have been through it or going through the same stages, or maybe they just went through a stage that you're kind of now in that stage they just went through 6 months ago, and you can kind of tap in. I think one of the challenges though is because you mentioned like abundance of advisors, or how'd you say it?
Yes,
What is the proverb?
I
Say
said,
again.
yeah. So where there is no guidance, a people fall, but in an
Mm-hmm.
abundance of
Mm-hmm.
counselors, there's
So,
safety.
okay. Yeah. So the abundance of counselors is, yes, there's safety. It's also like, is there
Here, here,
is
yeah,
there a limit to what
that's it.
abundance means?
Well, that's very true, right? Yeah, too
Because
much, right?
there's a lot of, I mean, like in other words, too many cooks in the. Is there a chance? Is there a time when there's too many cooks in the
For
kitchen,
sure.
if you will, right? And so I do think that it's like, because if you ask 10 people the same question and they're all people that you trust
Hmm.
and you've been there before, you might get some version of 6, 7 different kind of ways of going about a strategy, or handling this change or whatever it is, and then or do you come out more
Right.
confused? So it's almost like you have to kind of like really distill it down to just a couple of voices
Hmm.
or a few, whatever that means, right? Just to kind of make sure you're not getting
Yeah,
like analysis by paralysis on like,
that's right.
or is
Yeah,
it paralysis? Is it paralysis by
yeah,
analysis? Did I say that wrong? Analysis by paralysis. I think it's the other way around.
by analysis.
Paralysis by
Yeah, that's right.
analysis. You want to, and so you don't want to get stuck in the mud because you've gotten 20 people kind of in your ear, but
Well, I mean,
um,
I think, yeah,
but
you're right
yeah,
about that, and I think that it's also wise to is to follow after you've gotten that guidance, is to say, okay, I got to make a decision. I got to, we've talked about this for 10 years now, having a bias for action, right? Like understanding that you have to make a decision, and so I think there's a sense of that too. But there's so much wisdom out there. Tap into it, and then ultimately, whatever decision you make, this is one of the things that I've realized as a father, as an entrepreneur, there's always going to be regret in terms of like, oh, this happened and this didn't work out quite the way I wanted it. Or this worked out great, but this one little thing over here, there's always going to be something it's not, that makes it so it's imperfect. But that doesn't mean that you don't make the decision, and sometimes when you make the wrong decision, it's one of those like touch the stove moments where it's the next time you see that, you won't do it again. And that's okay too, because that gives you a sense of wisdom that you wouldn't have had if you didn't make that mistake. And so, I think having a bias for action, being willing to fail, and being okay with that, and also obviously, like we were talking about, seeking some wise counsel before you do all that is really important.
yeah. I we've done, gosh,
Yeah,
25 of
yeah.
these. I'm
I
probably
think I
wrong.
think I looked. I think it's actually
Let's call it
26. Yeah,
25.
25, 26. Yeah.
25 of these since we kind of relaunched in the fall. And so we've talked to some really awesome athletes, former, current and
Hmm.
former, particularly former, in this case, a number of coaches, NCAA women's basketball coaches, and Corey Close and Jeff Walls, for example. We talked about Bernie Kosar, kind of NFL
They're
legend.
both in the tournament too, by
A
the way.
number
They
of
both of them in the tournament.
yeah, yeah, yeah. UCLA got the overall
That's
number one
it.
seed in the
That's
women's
it.
tournament,
Yeah, they
I
did.
believe.
They did.
Yeah, so we got some teams to root for, but I think that I think this is one of those common. I think this is a kind of common thread between a lot of the people we've talked to, particularly those former athletes, is like this journey they've taken from being kind of, you know, like it,
Hmm.
like, right, like being a star, being, on the Olympic trials, doing, big things on the college basketball court my sister was on recently, right? And I think that what was their mindset in transitioning to whatever their next,
Hmm.
journey was. And it seems like a lot of that, there was a struggle or some sort of, identity kind of crisis that
Yeah.
existed of
Yeah.
some sort. Um, and then, and it feels like the common thread from like, how do they solve for this? Um, was a lot about like maintaining like maintaining a level of
Hmm.
purpose in the midst of the unknown, right? And like having to kind of be willing to redefine and reinvent that purpose, right? As their life, as things change in
Yeah.
their everyday,
Yeah.
you know. So I mean, heck, the one podcast the one episode you missed that you weren't on that I was on with
Mm-hmm.
Iris Zimmerman, right? And she was talking about, her and her sister, who were both Olympians, were able to kind of go back and actually, they bought the skating studio. I'm probably saying that wrong. It's just skating studio,
Skate club.
the location. Yeah, the skate club. Exactly. The skate club. They bought it, and so they could kind of give back from that
It's really
coaching and
cool.
development
Yeah.
perspective, right? So I think for Iris, like, that was just a really great way for her to kind of transition from
Love
performer
that.
to coach, but I don't know if you saw anything in some of the interviews we've had in the past that resonated with you relative to this topic, and kind of being able to kind of redefine their purpose,
Yeah.
and whatnot. But if you
Yeah.
do you have anything
Yeah, I
off the
mean,
top of
I
your
think
dome that
I see a common theme of when with these ultra elite athletes, performers, super successful corporate athletes, whatever they are, when we're interviewing them, is that they take what they learn from their sport, or they take what they learn from their past, and they apply those fundamentals to what they're doing now, and they drive
Mhm.
it towards whatever their purpose is. And you bring up just like that. That's a great word. The folks that we've interviewed that that run at adversity and run at change, and are kind of these people that just break the mold. They have a high sense of purpose, and they are committed to their fundamentals. It's like non-negotiable. We often hear them explain that concept, whether they use the terminology or not, this illusion of choice, where they realize that they don't really have a lot of choices. If they want to be great, they can't just hang out, with everybody else and do what everybody else does if they want to be different. It just doesn't make sense, right? Like it's counterintuitive. And so that's what I see. I see strong fundamentals, a drive at purpose, and again, that's why I love doing what we do, Harry, because you get to listen, and then it's our choice whether or not we apply them to our walk as parents and as leaders. And that's really been great to hear and unpack those.
Yeah. I mean, I think that 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 concept of just being a heat
Yeah.
seeker, right? I think in the
Hmm.
face of change,
Run right
or
at that.
challenge
Yeah.
or pressure, yeah, I mean, you have to kind of seek it, and even like when we talk about even our kids, like trying to put them in positions where they're facing
Hmm.
discomfort as much as possible, because it just helps you build a tolerance for it. I mean, it's just like if I was going to train for
Yep.
a marathon, um, there's going to be a discomfort,
Yeah.
for me especially, but there's going to be discomfort along the way, as I'm training alone, because I know on race day it's going to be significant discomfort at some point. So like, how do I kind of, build an endurance for the inevitable discomfort, so that way, I reduce how often the discomfort comes, how long, it
Yeah.
lasts, because discomfort typically is temporary,
Yep.
right? And so how can I build and tolerance for it, so that way, and that was one thing that Jack Green was talking about, is like he had this kind of natural,
Yeah. That's right.
or at least kind of trained early on, his ability to kind of endure
Yeah.
more pain than others, and that was kind of part of his
Hmm.
competitive advantage, and maybe still is a part of his competitive advantage even outside of sport. And so, like, how do we help, like, our kids build that? How do we build that for ourselves? How do we have leaders help, building that, so it becomes part of a culture, like the ability to withstand, withstand and endure
Yep.
discomfort. I think it's so critical, and that's kind of why we talk about this stuff as like mental conditioning, not just mental
Mm.
toughness. 'Cause mental toughness is kind of a result of conditioning.
Yep.
Like, you have to, conditioning is about behaviors. Like, I have to do this kind of work daily. I have to be thinking about, like, how do I elevate myself in this area daily, weekly, regularly, because that way I can, at the end of the day, be
That's right.
tough, right? Like, so I can,
That's right.
withstand. Mental toughness doesn't just show up at the door, as a level of conditioning and intolerance we have to build for, stuff that's coming our way. So,
Yeah.
I think this is good, man. This has been a fun topic. I think it's, one that resonates with kind of every, kind of, regularly in our daily work, in our daily lives, as people, right? As human beings,
For
change.
sure.
'Cause it doesn't discriminate. This change is
It's
coming,
coming.
and it may
That's
be coming
breaking news.
rapidly, it may be
Breaking
coming
news is
often.
coming. Tariffs,
Yeah,
retail, stock
yeah,
market. It's all the
yeah,
stuff that's coming at us is it's change, and it's interesting when you consume that information in a way where you really take out that emotion, it does help you navigate through this life. That's the one thing that's stood out to me, is that that change is constant, and it's inevitable that it's going to be here. But like how we deal with it, we totally have control over that. And it's not perfect. You're still going to have feelings. We're not robots. But when you start to apply some of these things that these elite performers have tapped into, it really does help you through, navigate through life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, I think it's a great place to close. So thanks for those that are listening to part 2 of this conversation about change and transitions, and how we, how we combat, that common
Mm.
theme of change. I think that I look forward to kind of the next, episodes we have. We're going to have, some people from certainly different walks of life. We have some, some former Olympians, some more former Olympians that are joining us. We got some folks that have played in the NFL and retired, now in business. We have some folks that are in the nutrition space.
That's good,
Talk
man.
a
That's
little bit
good.
about
You
that. So
you
yeah,
got to get
yeah,
this body right
yeah,
going into
yeah.
the summer, man.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. So we got some really cool folks coming our way, and looking forward to sharing those with you guys. But we appreciate this, and looking forward to seeing you guys on the next episode of Limitless Minds. Remember, you don't have to be sick to get better.